getting ready to revalve a set of suspension for a 2023 KTM 300 XCW. So we're gonna have a PDS shock and the Xplor forks. So start tearing these things down and get ready for install. So one of the biggest things people don't understand with the Xplor fork is your compression side is literally just a pogo stick. You can turn your compression clicker all the way in. Doesn't do anything, and I'll show you why, but you pretty much there's no damping to it. So back it out all the way. Can break the cap loose. Expose the spring. Spring down, get the 22 in there, and lightly pull this apart. What happens now is you'll get to a spot where the spring guide has now bottomed all the way out against the rod, and the cap needs to come loose. I like to take them and just rock it back and forth. You can feel the tension on both of them kind of slowly loosen up, so now I can get my cap off and my spring guide off without putting vice grips on the damper rod, which some people like to do. And then we have to fix it, and then they get mad because we told them they're really expensive. So, all right, spring out. We see these a lot where the oil is still really good inside of these because these forks do not work so good from the factory. So we're going to gold valve them, do a whole conversion on these things and make them a whole lot better. Okay. People will be like, what special tools do we need? You can just get one of the axle removers from like a street bike, or if you use it for your Japanese bikes. And it fits perfectly. Right in the bottom. Pull the compression base out. We are going to be replacing this whole piece with an adjustable one because you can see there's no hole inside of it to allow oil to flow or bypass any of the compression bases. So that piece is getting pulled out. This whole piece is going to be converted over in the RaceTech kit where it gets rid of the bleed hole, so your cartridge actually can have pressure on it and not just bounce like how it was. So now I should be able to just unthread this because I had rocked those threads back and forth. That makes it so we don't have to put vice grips. You can look on my wool and there's not a single pair of vice grips. It's not a suspension tool. Pull apart this carefully because there's a nice little yellow O-ring inside that can get damaged on the threads. So I'll show you on the other side with the rebound what actual valving looks like. Like, we're getting rid of all this. This little device is supposed to be your compression adjuster and doesn't work. Okay. I like to use a sharp wood chisel. Just get right in between the dust seal and the fork tube. Not using a dull flat blade that causes damage. This thing just pops it right out nice and clean. And then RaceTech special pick tool. It's nice and angled. For the edge in it. It's gonna be on this side, trying to see around the camera. Okay. Give it some love taps. get it out of there. Pull the seals off. A lot of people ask what this is a travel indicator. So what happens is you'll see guys that have put zip ties or O-rings on their forks back in the day. WP's coming with them stock to where when your fork compresses and it only uses that much, it shows you, hey, your stuff's too stiff, you're not using any of it. It's down to the bottom, you are bottoming out, and some adjustment is needed. It's really nice having an old bench from a buffet so I can just drain everything right into it. This side, however, your rebound side, your right side with the red, does make a difference if you were to go all the way in with it. Spring out. Let that thing drain. Start draining the fork out. This side is red on the compression side because it is for the rebound. They keep everything in these forks color, red, right, rebound. Looks like somebody's gotten a little bit crazy with their pressure washer, and there might be some water in on this thing. But we're replacing that anyways. We're gonna let these drain overnight. Okay, so here is your standard mid-valving that is on pretty much every fork besides that side. So what we're going to do is we're going to take and put a new post on with an actual mid valve, gold valve it, set it up for this guy's weight, riding style, everything, and get it set up specifically for him. Kind of let all these sit all night just to get all this residual oil off. Fancy spring compressor off Amazon. Usually we count the clickers to see what their settings are at and record them all, but we are going to be revalving this whole set, so it doesn't matter. I'm going to send it with its own clickers, but I just need to make sure that each clicker can cycle through each adjustment so we don't have anything that's stuck or frozen and then we don't realize and send a customer out there without having any range of motion, which we see a lot of frozen clickers here all the time. Take all the adjustment out. Oh, nice and stiff. Get in between the groove. A lot of times I'll see stuff from guys where they are actually taking a punch and getting into the drain holes, and then you can see. Now with the chisel, it's nice and sharp. It really doesn't damage anything, especially if you can't see it. Standard WP oil. Pretty much can never tell if it's destroyed unless it is completely black, but most of the time it just looks like this every single time. So the fill port where we're going to recharge the shock and set the piston height. Most shocks have a bladder, but it's very crucial that there is a solid piston here that floats, and if it's not set correctly, these shocks can explode. What I'm removing now is the high-speed adjuster, and that's just to make sure that we can get it clean. Get all the blue stuff out so we can put our iced tea inside of it. Secret. Set the piston height down so that way I can get it all cleaned out when we put it in the solvent tank. Gonna do some modifying to the nut with a check valve. These fancy guys are just a coat hanger that are designed to hold all your valving to clean it. Super easy. I'm going to take the washer, throw it on the ground first, but I'm going to take the washer off the stack. I'm going to take all the shims, give the piston to the customer, take all the other shims, save this base plate, and I'm going to take all those and throw them away. Pull the seal head off, dust cap, and the bumper. That way we can make sure all this is cleaned and micro polished. Got his box of stuff we're not using no more. Let everything drain in this bin for a while, get all the blue stuff out before we hit it with solvent, so that way we're not contaminating the solvent tank. Okay, just got them all out of the solvent tank, all cleaned up. Let them dry. We'll get them all staged back up, ready to install everything. Just like the hold of that. Give it a nice torch. Spun right off. Okay, let's put it over there to cool off for a while. I just like to put a screwdriver through the bottom of it, not to put any pressure on it, just to hold it if it was to slip, but got very, very light pressure on there so that way I'm not denting the tube. Some red Loctite on it. Got these fancy aluminum soft jaws so that way we don't ruin the rods. Let that one cool down too. Grease up that O-ring a little bit so that way it's basically what is the principle of clickers in your guys' forks is oil is going to flow through this hole. And what we're going to do is we're going to restrict how much comes out of these bypass holes. So when you turn your rebound all the way in, this needle will go in and shut it all the way down to where practically no oil will go through here and everything has to go through the shims, and that's what makes it stiffer. And when you're making it softer, you're just opening it up so that way oil can flow through and not go all the way through the shims. So it gives you a range of adjustments. But with that silly thing that they put in there, there's no difference between going full soft and full hard. It's constantly just bypassing the oil basically, so that's why we put these guys in here. Throw some Loctite on it so it doesn't fall out. You don't need globs of Loctite, basically you just need to stripe it. These type of shims are called delta shims. They put these in here so that way it doesn't restrict the flow going into the mid-valve side of everything. But we don't utilize them with ours because ours flow enough oil. I always try to clamp down spots where the rod is not going to be going through any type of seals or bushings or anything that can cause damage, because you'll see guys that keep pliers and stuff like that and it just ruins. It'll cut the seal right in the head and then you're done. You got to replace the rod and the seal and everything. So these are going to thread down and basically cover a spot that's not part of the travel. So I will usually clamp on there. It's a good safety measure to make sure you're not going to ruin anything. If there was going to be, say maybe this had a burr in it or something silly in it, that way you're not causing more damage to the customer's suspension. They give you soft jaws too in the packages if you don't want to buy the tooling, which is super helpful. I can get these things Loctited so that way we can let it dry while we're working on other stuff. You make sure the check valve is functioning properly. Okay, so makes the job a little bit easier if you just pre-stack everything so all your valving can just kind of drop in. Then you can just make sure it floats right, get it Loctited. Okay, now we're going to check the most important thing on these forks. It's going to be the float. So there's a certain distance that this is going to be open, and supercross riders basically run really tiny float where there's not a lot of check valve action going on. and your more enduro riders, hard enduro stuff is going to be more open, so that way it gives you that really nice plush setting to it. So here is an installed rebound gold valve with his properly set float. While that dries, we'll sit there and put that in there. Spring perch. Good practice to do is to get these all the way bottom. It's going to change different from when you had them on the cap. And I'll see guys online all the time that are just like, hey, I just rebuilt my forks myself and I have no clicks, or it just spins forever. Basically what you're wanting to do is you want to get this cap all the way down. See how much thread is left on there? Is now you would bring the spring guide all the way up to it. Because what will happen for some of these guys, bring it up so you can see, it's like when it's installed on the bike, sometimes these will get stuck. It'll be like that, and the cap will come off. And now you're only having that much thread showing, so when you go to start tightening it back up, if it starts tightening up any of the rod back to it, now you don't have any adjustment with your fork. So best practice, bring it all the way down to the end of the threads first, bottom this out, then bottom out the cap, and then bring the spring guide all the way back up to your cap. Alright, so now this guy should be nice and cool. We can start working on this side. This side went on a lot easier than the other side. Okay, so this one, there's going to be production tolerances that are different in different forks. This one's too loose for what we're trying to accomplish today. So we are going to change up probably the packing shims in it so we can tighten the float up, make it not so mushy. This is critical. It's a huge deal on these forks, and I'll admit, the first couple of years I wasn't getting as close as I should have been with this. So see, now I have it a little bit too tight. Get a little bit of oil on a flat surface. We're just going to take about 0.05 millimeters off this guy. Like I said, super critical, so if that means sanding the valves down, making sure they're getting rid of some of that production tolerance, whatever we have to do to get what our spec says. Now we can Loctite this thing down, and then we are done with the fork valving part of it. And bring this one all the way back down to the end of this rod. 5 million threads later, she's ready to go. I like to put them in order and how they go in, just so it's super easy to just grab and go, but sometimes people don't understand which way they go, so we'll talk about everything real quick. So your bottom of your fork's gonna have your travel indicator, your dust seal. Your dust seal is the piece that you actually see. This is not really the part that is bad. This just keeps the dust out from getting to your oil seal, which is when you have leaky seals, that's what leaks, not this guy. So a lot of guys will just replace just the oil seals in their bike, saves them a little bit of money without having to do the dust seals, because they could be fine, and as long as they're not cracked or showing any type of damage and letting dirt in there to fail, you really don't have a problem. We're gonna go take care of this guy real quick. This is your retainer clip. This holds your oil seal in. Oil seal goes in with the lip facing down. I was always told it's gonna be the side that has a spring on it. Well, there's a spring there, there's a spring on the inside of it too. It's gonna be, you gotta look at your lips. Which way is gonna keep the oil in? Like when the pressure comes on it from this way, it's gonna squeeze the seal to the shaft or tube and get it to where it holds the pressure in. So this one you will install with, on the SKF seals, I guess where you could see the spring, but there's other brands, All Balls and stuff like that, don't even have any spring at all on the outside. And I've seen people put those in upside down. So this side where you can see deep inside of it is going to go inside with the oil. This side is on the outside. And you're going to have your big washer, your outer bushing, and then your inner bushing. So what we got going here is, this is an old drill press, and we polish the tubes. So we grab 400 grit sandpaper, and basically what this guy does is this spins around, and then what we're doing is basically micro polishing the fork tube. It also helps us figure out if there's any scratches, dents, nicks, burrs, anything like that. You can get them polished out, or you can feel it and realize that you need a new tube. So what this does is, this is like on a cylinder, there's a nice cross hatch into it, and the oil actually will fill in all of the little scratches and flows a lot smoother, a lot smoother than coatings and stuff like that. A lot of coatings are just for cosmetic, but there are some performance coatings, but this is a cheap way to make sure that we're putting some type of performance into your fork. Some companies were charging $50 to do that, and that was not $50 worth of work. It's just an included one that goes on. As long as you don't have coated forks, we polish them all. Now that we are done with that, I'm going to install the seals. A little bit of grease in there, just not a lot, just enough to help it slide down a little bit easier. Kind of think of it like windshield wipers. If your windshield wipers are dry, they streak, and that's when they stop working. So as long as you keep these things, this is RaceTech Ultra Slick Grease too. I've probably gone through 9,000 of those since I started doing this. Do it on our bushings, do it on everything, so the assembly of everything keeps it nice and smooth. Wait for it to snap in. And just kind of make sure that it's set in the groove the whole way. One thing I like about the WP forks is they have these things slotted now. Beta does the same thing with the Sachs forks, but it basically doesn't spin the cartridge inside. The bottom of the fork actually has it indexed too, to where you just slide it in. Get this thing in here and get it lined up. This goes to the end of it. Throw our gold valves in. Okay, go ahead and tighten these into the cartridge. And on these forks, since they are open chambers, your compression is going to be on the bottom and your rebound is going to be back up on top. And so WP actually sends these things out with your right side being your rebound and your left side being your compression. Well, we are doing a whole conversion on these forks, so it's changing it to where compression's back on the bottom like most traditional open chamber forks, and your rebound is going to be back up top on both. So this is no longer a compression adjuster, it is your rebound. Our springs from RaceTech are stamped with what rate they are, so that way it makes it a little bit easier on us. And we also have a spring tester to test all of them too. Test the rates that come out of your bike, see if anything has changed, if they've sacked out. But we're gonna set the fork in there, and we're looking for a target of 4 millimeters of preload. So our measurement from the cap, we got 277 installed. 277. We're at 283 free length. 283 minus, it's going to be 6 mils. And then we're going to get the recess of the cap. So there's 2 mil there, 2.1. Yay, basic math. Super critical, but basic math. So now that that one is set, I'm going to do my oil level. Sweet oil level gauge from RaceTech, just got a new one. Been using the same one for the past 10 years. But Ethan's gonna be using that one now. And I've been also using the same exact Arizona Sweet Tea jug since 2014. But I like to pull it all the way up. Let's adjust this guy. We get filled up pretty close to the top. Now we have to bleed the cartridge, because right now this whole thing is just going to fall down. So, got bubbles coming up. We're looking for some resistance in here. Might have filled it up a little bit too much on this one, but alright, there we go. There's some resistance, so you'll have nothing, and then you can see that it stops. So, I'm trying to bleed this cartridge. One good tip is I like to pull it up, put my hand over the top, force air, and it'll push that oil from the bottom up in there. Okay. Once it's nice and bled out, I'll make sure that I can get a nice even pull, let it bleed out again, do it a couple times just to make sure that there's no air in there. And then our oil level is with the outer tube empty. And it's confusing sometimes when you read that in our paperwork, because they're like, what the heck does that mean? That means there's oil in between the inner tube and the outer tube. And you want to make sure, basically by pulling it all the way up, it pushes all that oil back into the inner tube. So now we can pull out the excess. Make sure, one more time, all the way up and down. See, there was even a little bit more in there. Get a majority of that oil out. Triple check, we're good to go. Now, we already set the spring preload, so pull it up. I like to use my thumb to hold it. Drop the spring. Put a little bit of side tension just so it doesn't fall all the way down. Bringing the spring guide up to the cap now. Now, just because I don't like to get any spring damage, I like to put mine under. Grab my WP fork tool, push them together. You gotta get crazy and snap it, but make sure it's nice and tight. Washers are free. Set our spring preload to 0. They have an external one so that you can add 3 or 6 more mils of preload on it. We set our minimum preload at the 0 mark. But now, make sure she's tight. Now this fork that had no damping to it, you can hear it working that oil. Get this in the rack and wait for the next fork. .281 free length. The total length of the spring from a single point. Just make sure the seal's all the way down. So it's just easier to get the measurement in with the PVC spacers, because then it doesn't go into the cap and we can actually see where it's at. So grab it from the outside, and we are at 277. Look at that. I ain't even got to do nothing on this one. There are production tolerances with everything in this world, so that's why we have different preload spacers to add to everything. You just have to do some work and not just throw them in. I've just refilled the same bottle for the past 10 years. I haven't used new bottles, and I've had people say, oh, you're putting tea in the forks? No, I'm not putting tea in your oil, although I have gotten oil in my tea before, and it does not taste good. See if we have enough in there now. Yep. Okay. I like to put them with the spring sizes where you can see them if you ever needed to see what size was in one for me or the next guy. Alright, now we're going to finish cleaning these things up. We throw the fork lowers in an ultrasonic to get all of the rest of the dirt out of the bottom of it. Rack. Throw them in there. And while those are cleaning, wipe down our tools and get ready to start assembling the shock. So we're adding a bladder kit onto this one too. So we will get that open and start working on that first. But we're getting rid of the piston design and throwing an actual rubber bladder. It helps with heat, decreases the friction, and makes it so you can service it without any special tools. Trying to heat up that Loctite to make it easier to remove. So we'll go take it back to the solvent tank after it cools down and re-clean the body. In the meantime, we can start doing other stuff. It's a new bike, so he doesn't want to do a bottom out bumper, but if they're cut or cupped or anything, we will replace them anyways, because you can spend a lot of money to just do it again. If it already started with damage, call them and tell them, hey, I know you didn't want to do it, but I highly recommend doing it. Okay. So one thing we are going to do is we're going to put a new seal in it, and RaceTech sells seals, dust seals, bushings, everything you need to rebuild your stock seal head. And one of the most important mic pick tools in the world, but this is a little bit cheaper than buying a whole aftermarket cheap seal head, but pull them all out. Get it all cleaned out. Of course, it has a suction to it now, so it won't let me have it. There we go. Make sure everything in there is nice and clean. Got drawers and drawers full of, we have valving kits, seals, bottom out bumper shaft bushings, more bottom out bumpers, bladders, bushings. I mean, we got so much stuff here in stock to make sure we're not waiting on anything. But way cheaper to just add a seal into the OEM seal head without throwing this thing away. You know how many things of those are in the garbage from when we first started doing this, and we didn't know that was what you can do, that you could just rebuild them with a seal that, boom, easy way. I mean, we can do the dust seal. This is a 23 bike. This thing has not a lot of time on it, so you just while we're in there, put a seal in it. Okay. So while I'm waiting for that, I need to go ahead and we drill out the rebound separator valve that comes stock in this guy. So I will be back with that. Got everything else cleaned up, ready to install the bladder kit. Make sure it's bottomed out all the way inside, and then we use a strap wrench to give her the last of the beans to tighten it up. Sell the high speed, put that back in there. Next, we are going to build. If you're super careful, you can get your shock seal on without ripping it. Just don't force anything. Put that whole stack on there. The shock shaft nut is actually, let me figure out where the camera goes. You see the threads don't start until about there, so we can give it a little bit of some shoulder, but need to make sure that it's way less than that. So I'm actually, to check it, what do we got? Okay, so I can at least bring one of them up. One on the bottom. About a 4mm shoulder on it. So as long as we're under that and it can bottom out, we're good to go. And we leave the secondary valving stock. Okay. Alright, so now we're going to bleed the shock. This bleeder is sold directly from RaceTech. I just like to, it's got a whole reservoir back there that fills up full of oil, but I like to make sure that I just put some in here so I don't have to constantly fill that guy up. I'm trying to see around the camera while I'm doing this at the same time, so but there it goes. See, suck on the oil level. Make sure that the seal head retainer is in its groove. Perfect. The filling and bleeding. So right now it's sucking all of the fluid and air into the holding tank back there. That's going to go to the bottom. There goes all the air. You can see it making a bunch of noise, and basically it's full of air at this point. The bubbles coming out. So now we'll pressurize it. Push oil from the bottom into there, so that way if it sucks any of the air into this, it goes right to the top, so that way the shock is air free, and this machine will actually pull the air out of the oil. Phil needs another pull to it. Some air bubbles popping out through there. Now we'll pull the vacuum. Turn the shock upside down to get any of the bubbles up through here, through the whole high speed back in, and then there we go. That gets a big chunk of them out. I run a couple cycles on it, so it's going to take a while. So we'll run it through there and then finish it up. Right, so now we're done bleeding it out. Now the whole shock at this point is full of oil, and this is where we're going to put the bladder into, so there's going to be some excess that pours out so that we make sure that it's airtight. Want it to overflow, but also don't want to waste a bunch of oil, so still a little too full. A little bit more. That could just overflow, but that's that much oil that we'd be wasting, so there we go. To overflow just a little bit. All right. We will charge it full of nitrogen. Okay. Go till it lightly seats. All right. Sweet. Throw it in the ultrasonic. Get most of the oil out. Get it cleaned up. Now we got to set spring preload. RaceTech wants us at 9 mils. $230 right now, so $221 for our final installed length, and we'll lock her down and be done. And this should be getting him right in the range of where he needs to be. There we go. There it is. Forks are all stickered up, ready to go.